forward to talking more. Ishita, how are we?
To get to a good output, right? Many people think in outputs and then they just sort of neglect.
We've just got some technical difficulties. We'll thank our sponsors, Dojo AI and ACI.dev, for sponsoring the show. ACI.dev that builds MCP servers. Will and the team over there are incredible. And Dojo AI is helping challenger brands with their marketing and scaling incredibly well, building the OS that's going to outperform some of these generational companies. Ishita, how are we?
Very well, Viraj. Thank you for having me. And sorry, I had like a bit of technical.
Did you have the show in the background? Were you listening to me?
I did. And I just like, I didn't realize that's the point in time where you were just bringing me on.
No problem. Look, I can't wait to get into this with you. And I think just to start off, right, out of everything, what I love about On Fabric is the memory aspect of it, right? It's giving context to any action that we take online, potentially. Tell me everything, because we had an offline conversation. I can't wait to get into this. Let's go.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Fabric, right? So the way we think about it, like Fabric creates your digital self. And so like really for the last decade, we've been searching, we've been clicking, and now increasingly we're prompting. And all of this data exists usually within the platform in which it was created. So if you're searching on Google, that data lives on Google's side and it's used for search optimization. And if you're on GPT, it lives on GPT's side and it's used for better responses for you. What Fabric does is Fabric brings all of this rich personal data from platforms like Google, Instagram, YouTube. We have a lot of others like Booking, LinkedIn, Pinterest, TikTok, and hopefully all the other AI apps as well, to create this shared memory for the apps that you use every day. Mm-hmm. So with Fabric, you can already bring your digital self, which is comprised of your interactions across various different platforms, into your AI apps like Claude, ChatGPT, Mistral, Cursor, anyone who's really an MCP client, and more. And we really call this context portability. And the idea is that users should be able to control and bring their digital self with them. And doing this will create a new era of the personalized internet where apps don't actually compete by holding on to your data, but rather they compete on user experience and value, where data is almost the baseline off of which everything operates.
Like it feels like you're fundamentally destroying the business model of like all of these incredible platforms that we use for like the last 15 years. Where do you not think they're going to build competitors to this, or just like cookies were, sort of phase them out, bring them back in? They couldn't figure out which was which. How do you think about, almost being chained to the platforms to acquire this data?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of value being created by us, right, primarily. I think we're not really destroying business models as much as creating a whole new market. And the idea there is, right, that no one has an advantage in moving first and opening up their data here. Mm-hmm. So for instance, Gemini would benefit from getting context from GPT and vice versa. Like GPT would benefit from getting context from Instagram. And primarily the user would benefit from being able to continue their interactions across, different platforms without needing to repeat the same things over and over again. But who will be the first to move is the key question. Like the company that moved first, if Google open up all its data to, a competitor, that could be not a great move on some parts. But really what's quite interesting is that with AI models, this has fundamentally changed in that there is a way to collaborate now. So Fabric is that user-initiated layer in the middle where Google doesn't have to open up its data to everyone and give it to everyone. It's really the user who decides that I get a lot of value from Google, but I also think I can get a lot of value from GPT and Claude. And so I am going to initiate that data transaction. And in return, Google earns my trust. And so when Google asks for access to other data sources, I will also connect Fabric and Google. And Google will also get the benefits. So everyone's user experience just fundamentally shifts up rather than anyone else's business model being destroyed, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think sort of second order effects of this happening, right? We haven't had this level of personalization, this level of context when we're using applications ever before, right? Sort of iOS does a kind of good job of it. Google's done a great job of it. But from an ad perspective, the algorithms have got even better. TikTok, X is incredible. But for the first time, it feels like the power's in our hands with Fabric. What do you think this does to the way we interact on the web? Like, is everything just going to have context? And so, like you said, we're going to have to focus on design more? Or is that just a short-term moat that people lean into with something else being on the other side?
I think it like leads to like a whole new era of like apps being created, right? Like this is, and I used to build consumer products at Clio, and before starting Fabric, I was building a consumer health company. And I love consumer products, and I use a lot of consumer products. I pay like hundreds every month for amazing consumer products. And I think this will just lead to amazing, like, products being created for us of the kind, some of which we can imagine. So you can imagine like dating apps right now are having people swipe right and left all the time. You could have agents that date your agents. And the big thing that's blocking that from happening is actually we don't know what your agent, like what actually you like from a dating perspective. But actually, if you combine the data from Instagram and Google and GPT, we suddenly start to get a picture of someone that looks very much like you. And that someone, your digital self, could go and date other digital selves and go and find the best people for you. And like all of these parallels exist. And, there's like consumer shopping, consumer travel, the category of apps that has just never been able to exist before because the way that algorithms improve is by you interacting on their platform. But you might not have an incentive to interact on their platform. You only have an incentive to interact when you have something to do at that point in time. And then you have like a lot of like, things to do at that time. And you're just frustrated because like, okay, now I need to tell my whole life history to this app in order to be able to do something. But our sort of, fundamental thesis is that it's just one person, like whether you're on Google or you're on Instagram or you're on GPT, you're one person. So if we can understand you, we can create a whole new category of consumer experiences for you.
Do you think about the data sovereignty a lot? So not from the perspective of like the nation, but the human being of where this context is going to sit. When we first discussed this and we sort of jumped on an intro call when we were chatting about it, and then I looked into it and I was like, you're giving us agency for the first time ever. Like you're giving us ownership of our data almost. And that could, like, as you said, change the landscape of the types of apps we're able to create, but also gives us the ability to sort of think where we want to spend time more than ever before, right? Like, am I trusting a Gemini over a GPT? How do you think about the sovereignty aspect of this, of humans and consumers owning their data for the first time?
Yeah. So I think like, there have been people who've worked on data sovereignty and like personal data vaults for some time. And we've like spent some time now in the space, like between open banking and my co-founder working on like IoT infrastructure. We've thought a lot about this. Like the problem has never been with users owning their data. Like it's fine if you own your data. I think the problem has been that, you're not able to use your data. Like the value of the data lies in its usage, not in its ownership. So in principle, you could get a copy of your data from Google, like, some like from quite a long time ago using Google Takeout. It is possible to like download your data and, like it's called subject access requests in the EU and you get like an archive of your data. But the problem is if it's not available to be used in like a machine readable format, then what do you do with it? Like you can't take your data and like just go and say, hey, like here's all my data and like do something for me. There's no other service on the other side can have value from it. I think the real value now of combining data sovereignty with the usage of the data is actually now data sovereignty enables the usage of the data. So essentially like the initiation of the connection from Fabric is always like, for instance, all our MCP connections are user initiated. So what that means is like more and more apps can integrate the user with the user's consent. So that's how we view it. Like if there is sovereignty, i.e. there is legal frameworks for you to have your data, and there is a protocol through which that data moves, like those really act together. Like one without the other is kind of pointless. Like you could own all your data, but if you can't do anything with it, it's pretty useless. And if you could have the functionality to move your data, but if someone blocks you and says this is not your data, you can't really do anything still. So they have to like work together.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense. It's focused on the output of usage of data versus like the ownership of that data.
Yeah, they work together. Like you can't have, if you don't own the data, you can't move it. And if you can't move it, there's no point in owning it.
talk to me on the MCP side. Like, were you betting that these servers and this process gets considerably better in the future, where it's just instantaneous, the flow of information is clear, there's agents moving back and forth, there's, like you said, like Viraj's agent is dating someone else's agent in the past time so he can find his best partner. How long do you think till we get to that?
I think like some of it depends on like where we're trying to get to, but a lot of the fundamentals are already there. Now, of course, there's like a lot of like things that need to be ironed out with the different protocols. There's obviously like adoption issues as well. Like, you know, for instance, if you think about, so we have an MCP server, it works with every MCP client. Like, you know, you can connect Fabric inside Claude, inside GPT, inside Mistral, Cursor, like wherever, like, you know, you use your primary LLMs. But if you think about like how the experience differs, you know, for instance, GPT has like specifications on what the tools need to be called. And then also custom, like, you know, integrations, like custom connectors can't be integrated outside developer mode, for instance, which means GPT's own memory cannot be combined with like Fabric input. So it's things like this where, you know, the protocol still needs to progress a bit more, like things are still in the early stages, but a lot of the I mean, there's also like Anthropic wrote a wonderful sort of, you know, blog recently about how there are like fundamental issues with how MCP is like utilized and how like the architecture is set up. And all of those are being worked on right now. I think the important thing is that there is now a way for agents to like call tools. And like MCP is like one way of doing that, and MCP is improving. Like, but this is very much this way of integrating where the user initiates a connection, which is like a connector, which is a set of tools, and the agent on the other side is able to use them without like heavy integrations. Like, you know, if you remember, like, I mean, it's not even that long ago, like a few years ago, all the open banking connections needed you to build an integration. Like, that's not the case anymore. Like, you can have user-initiated servers, and that's very, very cool. And that leads to us being able to actually improve user experiences from day one, essentially.
What's the blocker here? Do you think it's the MCP server, or do you think it's something else? Is there a significant blocker to your progress? Or is it just the
Like,
memory?
do you mean like in general, or like technically, or like in any
Technically.
specific like like we're making a lot of like, I would not say like there's like a lot of things like, you know, we're working on like it's a complex engineering problem to be able to like bring together different sources of data, you know, to like create this enrichment. We're experimenting with a lot of like interesting architectures. You know, for instance, one problem we find is that you know, there's this concept of when you take like a data from like a source like Google, and you plug it into another source, like oftentimes like the data is taken out of context, so it might not be that useful. So for instance, like Google search data will best predict Google search. How do you like have Google search data predict your dating behavior, right? And like how do you do this in like some sort of like real-time way?
How do you do
So
that?
yeah, it's like, you know, it's one of the challenges that we're solving. Like we essentially what we do is, of course, we take this data and we like unify like different data sources into like a unified schema. So we extend activity stream, which is the W3C standard for search and social data. And the idea here is that the first step is if there is search on Google, it's similar to search on TikTok and it's similar to search on Instagram. So you want to at least schematize the data in a way that you know what data is what. The next step then involves actually structuring this data in a way that is like easily traversable. So like if you get a query from Claude, hey, like what restaurants does Ishita like? You want to be able to traverse my user understanding like quite fluidly to like go from entity to entity in like an agentic structure. So you might search for restaurants first, and then you find the 3 cuisines I like, and then you search within the graph for those cuisines, and then you keep searching in like, you know, multi-hop ways. And then you combine all of that into like an LLM-friendly preview, and you send it to the LLM. And all of this needs to happen very fast because the user doesn't need to wait. So it's like it's a pretty challenging like engineering problem in many ways. And then there's obviously all of the legal and regulatory challenges that come with like, you know, actually getting personally identifiable information from data sources that were never available before. So we are the first developer globally to have these kinds of integrations where we're like, yeah, we're actually the first developer ever to have this integration with a company like Meta, where we can help you move your Instagram stories, posts, likes, comments, messages, create context from it, and bring it to like, you know, Claude and GPT and everyone else. So there's just a lot of challenges, but we're sequentially working through them, and things are going really, really well.
When I was thinking about your banking experience, your open banking experience, my mind initially went to, well, what if she was able to monetize the data for the consumer? Not in the way of the platforms making up money off of it, but almost like a gig economy for consumers, in that they have access to their data and it's now coherent, and so can sell it to the platforms in a way where, monetize their usage online. Do you think about that in the context of Fabric?
No, we do not want to sell data. That's like one of the core like fund. If someone wants to build, like we think of it, like how do we think of Fabric? We think of Fabric as a company between like almost if Visa and Plaid had a child. Like that's how we think of Fabric as core infrastructure and like a network company. So we're building the network through which context flows.
The fabric for which context flows.
Yes, exactly. The fabric through which context flows. And we have a very strong consumer, like, focus, like Visa did back in the day, actually. And the thinking there very much is that actually the user should be the controller and the owner of their data, and we give them the tools to move it along. And at the beginning, we actually spend a lot of time making sense of the data and like actually bringing it to other developers who might need it. But over time, we want to be the infrastructure layer. And if a developer wants to sell the user's data, like that is between the user and them. Like I personally am not that interested in selling user data, mainly because I think it's a completely different set of like, it's a very different business to the kind of business that we see ourselves building at Fabric. And I think, at least for now, there hasn't been that much value in aggregating and selling data. Like usually most companies that aggregate and sell data, it's like $2 to $3 per month that they can pay the user. Usually the kind of users you attract with that proposition are not that valuable to businesses. So if you're selling your data for $2 or $3 a month, you're probably not that attractive to like a brand that might want to market, their products to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all of those things which, and really like we want to be the user's trusted source of, truth and like where the user's digital self lives. And the user decides, and another developer could come and offer that service. It's just not going to be us.
I love it. I liked how the answer was so quick. It was like, no, we're not doing that. Like this is not the game that we're playing. The game that you're playing is obviously like building infrastructure here. Is it still very difficult to do that in the age of AI?
Yes, I like to believe so. It's like it's easier than it was like some time ago, but like of course when you're dealing with personal data, you want to have engineers on your team who are infrastructure engineers, which is, of course, like things can be done a lot faster all the time.
Are
but
you like
there are
in Claude code, just like riffing with Claude, or is it not like that?
we do use we use Cursor, we use Claude Code, we use Devin, we use all the tools, but a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve are also like engineering problems. So like, you need to have good engineering principles. So like like Claude Code and Cursor can't tell you the best way to structure this data is actually might not be semantic. You might need to use graph-based approaches, or
Is
you
that
might
because
need
it just doesn't know? Like it can't figure it out because it's never been done like this before?
Yeah, like that's some of it. And I think like, a lot of these models, right? Like if you think about how search works for AI tools, it's like grep. So like, it's just like very fast search as opposed to like a structured understanding of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like incidentally, the problem that we're trying to solve, which is deep user understanding, also exists in the enterprise context where you would need like a person who has years and years of like knowledge and failed experiments to be able to come up with the right sort of ways of solving these problems. So some of it is just, it's like really new. Some of it is, it requires a lot of like human intuition and judgment, even on the engineering side, to decide how to solve certain problems. Like, and then on the business side, right, that what are the most obvious ways of building a company in like personal data? Like the first thing, like, an AI would tell you is you should sell the data. And yet I told you that we do not want to touch that because like we know the companies that work in that space, and that's just not something that we personally want to do for certain reasons. So I think we use a lot. We like have pro subscriptions and enterprise subscriptions to all the coding tools, but there is a lot of value, and we hire like really, really great engineers.
Are we hiring from Europe, or are you hiring from the US, or is it a little bit of everywhere?
So like right now, our core team is in Europe. So my co-founder Massimo is, he's from ETH Zurich, but we work in London. And like our two other engineers are from Switzerland, and like from the UK, and worked in like blockchain and big tech like Meta. So like yeah, we're all like based here for now, but we're very open. Like we're interviewing for a couple of AI engineer roles. And so we're very open to hiring from across the pond as well.
Tell me more.
But of course,
Do we have like a work culture over here that is like a 996 type vibe, or is it very much like we're building a generational company here at Fabric? We're trying to change the way that people interact with data, and so we all have to go on that mission together. And it, like you become missionaries when you join Fabric. Is that the way
yeah,
that you think about it?
yeah, we like, we just think that we just work all the time, like 7 days a week, like all the time. And it's because this is what we want to do with our time. It's not, it's not like a 996, or it's just like you work by default. And if you have something else, then you go do that something else. But you wake up, whether it's a Sunday or it's like a Tuesday, whether it's 6 p.m. or like it's, 8 a.m., like you just work and you think about like how we're going to solve context portability. And that's just like how it is, and that's how we hire. Like that's what we look for. And we've had successes. We've had some like amazing successes in terms of hires, and we've had some like learnings, and that has like made us even more determined that we need to hire in our own images, just because it just really frustrates us when people aren't as like into the mission as we are.
What are you looking for in engineers then? Like, is it not just talent from an engineering perspective, but like, is there a mindset that you look for? Maybe it's because of your time at Clio that you've picked up certain traits that you like. Humor me for a moment.
Yeah, so I mean, like the baseline is you
Yep.
have to be an incredible engineer. You have to be like a systems thinker, first principles thinker. You have to be able to like some of the problems that we're solving haven't been solved before. So you need to like know how to go about like solving some of these problems like as if nothing existed like in that space before. So like that's really really important for you. And this is also why like we look for mainly backend and infrastructure engineers. And even when we look for AI engineers, we look for computer science scientists and like machine learning like researchers who can then do good prompt engineering, like not the other way around, like not people who are doing good prompt engineering and they will learn the fundamentals of
And then
computer
back
science.
propagate into that. It's foundational level. We need you to think properly and understand
Yes.
first principles thinking and grow from there.
Exactly, precisely. So like that's like the baseline. Like if you do not meet that, like it's just like not even worth like having a conversation. But like on top of that, what we find is, yeah, we very much look for people who have like done like interesting, relevant, and related things before. So one of our team members used to work on data portability at Meta. So he built the infrastructure that we're now using.
Kind of makes sense to hire him.
Kind of makes sense to hire. Like so like if you've had like that much experience with the field, then you understand. Then we find that people who are generally interested in data sovereignty, in like decentralized applications, in like users having control over over their data, over like just their lives, like quantify itself, like really there's like a mission fit. Like it's very different, like it's different to explain, but oftentimes like I'll have conversations and it just clicks, and you're like, okay, like yeah, right, this person like really thinks like us. So I think that's like that mission bend is quite important, because I just don't think you can work for 20 years like at a very high intensity if you do not care about what you're doing. And then I guess like the third thing is you just have to be like intense and curious, and just like us in many ways. So like we have all sorts of weird interests, like I get like really deep on like certain weird topics like Mongols and history and
Why
all
didn't we
sorts of
spend half an hour talking about that?
yeah, exactly right. And you kind of have to like if you're not curious about the world, I think like it's probably like not going to be a fun place, just because it's we're spending so much time together that you really have to like the people that we are. And like it's fine, like we're not everyone will like it, and so we have a very high bar, and like candidates should also have a very high bar, but that's just how we approach hiring.
Eshita, I love it. Look, before we let you go, a little bit of a quick fire round. You ready?
Yes, let's do it.
How much did we raise?
3 million.
Amazing. Was the deck stacked in the right way? Did you get everyone on the cap table that you wanted?
Yes, yeah, like yeah, very much so. I can't like because we've not actually announced the round. But yeah, we've raised, enough to get to the next milestones, let's say.
I love it. What does the next milestone look like?
Yeah, I think we're really thinking about user adoption and user understanding. So we have some metrics on how we understand how good is this understanding that we have of you. We have some evals on what kind of questions we can answer about you when you connect all these data sources. We have some milestones on what data sources and integrations we support. So a lot of that looks like, on the product side. And then on the user side, it's adoption metrics.
Given that you spend so much time with the models, do you have a personal favorite?
I, that's a good question. I mean, I use all of them for different tasks. And my personal sort of wish is that I could just switch between them. And I do with Fabric. I'm able to do that quite a lot. So we're able to use our own product. If I had to gun to head, if I had to pick a favorite, I would say it's probably Claude. I really like Opus 4.5. But just general purpose, good reasoning, works with everything. But I use Composer and Opus and Sonnet within Cursor. I use GPT, of course, 5.1 for a lot of personal tasks. I use Opus.
It's just the latency, it's so quick fire. It's unbelievably good at just hot swapping between thinking and just rapid.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would like to exist in a world where I don't have to have favorite models. I can just pick the model I want for the use case that I want and bring context to it, so that there is no lag. So we've done a lot of user research, and people who use us often tell us that, hey, we love we think Claude is amazing, or we think X is amazing for Y, but a lot of my context lives within GPT. So I don't know how to take all of this to Claude for this use case. And so I would like to live in a world where, we don't have to pick favorites. We can just choose the model we want for the task that we want. And we provide context to it.
What was your favorite moment from Clio?
That would have to be probably just around the time that we raised the Series C. So I was working very closely with Barney, the founder of Clio, and a team that that is very close to me, and a lot of them are including Barney, are investors in Fabric. We just had a really good time. Clio is an amazing place, and we spent a lot of time. We spent months actually preparing for that raise. Modeling out all of the financial outcomes, thinking about retention, conversion, new products. And then we closed that round. After we started it, we closed it in a couple of weeks, and then it was $80 million. So it wasn't a small raise. So it was just it was an amazing team. And that would be one of the fun things we did there.
What is the biggest learning from Barney that you take and implement into Fabric?
Yeah, I think, and
just for context, I haven't had the pleasure of having you on the show yet. And so part of this is learning about how different people operate. So I'd love to understand.
So I think Barney has a unique quality where he really is hyper ambitious, and I think this is the thing that I've personally found that I want Fabric to be $1 trillion company, not 10 billion, 100 billion. Actually, if you change industries in a way that they should be changed, then you should be going for $1 trillion. That's the amount of value that you can create. And I think I probably inherited some of that from Barney, where it was just always Clio is the best company in the world. And we're going for $1 trillion, and we're going to change the financial lives of everyone who'll ever live from now on. So I think that is probably one of the amazing qualities that I think is makes him really incredible.
Just think bigger. I love it. Last one. We ask every guest on the show this: Mount Rushmore of founders. For you, who are they? Greatest of all time. 4 people. Let's hit it.
Interesting question. I mean, this is very contextual, right? So again, I don't want to pick again, there's amazing founders right now, right? Sam Altman, Elon Musk, there's just so many of them, Steve Jobs. But I would like to, think from my perspective.
That's why we asked it, because I find that people, they don't model their own image after them, but they take traits of these great people that live on their Rushmores versus the greats of all time. But it's who's the greatest of all time for you, right? And so you'll take bits of other people and implement it into the way that you build Fabric. And I find that it holds true in a lot of respects.
Yeah, so the first couple would have to be the founders of Plaid and Visa.
Makes sense.
again, really like the problems that he solved at Plaid, and I've listened to a lot of stuff that, a lot of podcasts with him, just like, having just having this mentality that some problems are just grinder problems, like they're really, really hard, and you just got to keep grinding. And, if you solve something that's really deep and really meaningful and really hard, like there's a prize on the other side. So, like I would say like Zach is probably one of those founders that I really look up to. Like Plaid had an amazing early story where they were like a consumer fintech first. Things weren't working. They'd built like this complex backend, realized that actually there's a lot of value in like just taking this backend and like finding other fintech startups that might get, because it's a difficult job to integrate a lot of banks. So I would say like Plaid, and I used like Plaid's product extensively at Clio. So I understood like how well it's built. And so like that would be like Zach would be one. D-Hawk, the founder of Visa, is like a really big inspiration for us. So he's probably the first person to come up with this structure of, almost like collaborative competition where, like essentially Visa built the network that we're trying to build with Fabric, right? So Visa is like the network that Fabric will be, but just in a completely different industry.
Yeah.
And so like independent entities collaborating in a network, like banks, which have, or merchants that have no incentive to use a card that's a single card, like they replace multiple loyalty cards with Visa, is just, it's really awesome. And we think of the problem in the same way, like why would apps and data holders collaborate? But if you can build a network where you align everyone's incentives, then they will.
Like why doesn't the world have this rail, like have these rails for data, right? It almost feels like this should exist.
It's a timing thing. Like it will exist. It just, there never was a good enough time because there were never use cases. So like now with like agents, there are use cases for taking this data out of context, right? For Visa to really, really work, you needed the consumer credit system to take off. And this is where D-Hawk was like an absolute like visionary, where when they did the early user studies for Visa, I think that the thing that stood out to me was like people were like, you want me to have a card to buy like burgers? Like, so I'm gonna like take a loan to buy a burger? Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm never gonna use this shit. But it takes a certain amount of like vision to think that actually like this is not credit in that you're taking a loan. It's actually just how you finance your day-to-day life. And so Visa just had this consumer like, insight that if we give them a card and they don't have to carry hundreds of loyalty cards, they will just use it. And then all the innovations followed like their own. So I would say those two. Then Barney, I think, would be like a big inspiration. And I could speak a lot about the work we did together at Clio. And like I think it informed a lot of my thinking on how to think about a company, like how Clio thinks about like monetization, about infrastructure, about tech. And then probably the last one, I'll go with like a bit of a wild card. I don't know if you know like Blake Scholl, who's the founder of like Boom Aerospace. Yeah, he's like a really cool guy. So they're building like supersonic sort of jets.
Wow.
And the idea, and I think the reason why I really like him is because he doesn't have a background in aviation. He had like no like structured background in aviation. He used to work, I think he was at Groupon as like a PM. He was like an engineer at some tech companies, but he just really cared about aerospace and supersonic flight. And he'd been like building models of like, supersonic planes since he was young. And he just said, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. And, like Boom is the company in the space that's sort of working on this. I think their first commercial aircraft is due in like a few years.
It's a few years. I think it's 2028.
I think it's 2027 or 2028. There was a big regulatory hurdle on like supersonic flights. He's helping the regulators like really change the rules, kind of like we are with data portability. So I really, really like him as well.
I love it. Eshita, this has been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to have you back on, like once you've announced the raise with Massimo, and I'm looking